Welcome to Perfectly Planted Podcast. I am your co-host, Besame Shering. If this is your first time joining us, welcome to our show. If you're part of our Perfectly Planted community, we want to thank you for spending time with us and hope you enjoy today's conversation. Daphne, good morning. I am so excited for the show today. But before we get into that, how are you? I know you had a busy weekend.
Vesame, I am doing great, and I am so excited for today's guest too. Yesterday, I actually spent a large part of the day at a local Baptist church. I was there with the some Food for Life instructors, and we were talking about food as medicine. So it was a
Excellent.
great opportunity to talk to the community about health and wellness and food, and there was actually a vegan restaurant that provided lunch meals. Yes.
Oh, how
So it
fun.
was a great chance for the community that may be vegan curious, or they may be
Yeah.
vegan, or we talked to quite a few people who are vegan and have fallen into the vegan processed food trap.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
yes, for
So
getting
easy to
back on
do.
track. It is. So our conversations yesterday reminded me that we were going to be able to have a conversation with Dr. Rock and Poe today. And it was
Oh,
just so timely to really understand how do you do this? How do you make these changes in life? And more importantly, how do you make them stick? Because we must have had over 100 people at our table, and it was clear that doing it and then making it consistent and
mhm.
making it a lifestyle habit, they are two different things.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Rock and Poe, welcome. We are so excited to have you here this morning.
Yeah, we're so excited.
It's great to
Thank
be
you. Thank
back.
you. Yeah, it's good to
And
be here.
yeah, I'm so excited to be here with Poe.
So
Yeah.
you two have your own podcast called The Health Feast, and I think we had that on the first image for those just listening in. We'll post it in the show notes and also later on. But the Health Feast podcast, I know that Daphne and I've been listening. It's amazing. It's fantastic, and I think you guys will talk about the purpose of that as well. Dr. Rock, we are honored to have you and Poe on our podcast in episode 27 of ours. You graciously shared your story and your health journey with us that has brought you to this point in your life. And I know that through conversations and meeting Poe, that's started to drum up a lot of the interest of how do you integrate, a plant-based life or your within your own life. So you could go to, almost like a camp or, a retreat. But then how do you integrate that in your life? But what I want to ask is, Poe, you've been on the quest to change your trajectory of your life. I think those were your words. Can you share some of your journey and how you started? I mean, I think that, ultimately we got to the Health Feast podcast to share with all of your listeners and viewers, but what got you there first? What was your initial, uh, I guess, quest and desire to make a change?
I think for anybody that's going to start, I think for me the biggest advice would be like it starts with your why. And I think like what is it about your life that you want to change? Like for me, it was about my kids. So that's what started the trajectory. Was when I started having kids, and I noticed that in my family, being overweight was every like just about everybody in my family was at some point overweight. So this goes back to when I lived in the island. So, but later in life, like within the last like year or two, I think is really like me looking at my kids and just saying like, you know what, I don't want them to have the same health issues. I don't want to have them the same challenges. So for me, it was just about what could I do now so that I can be a better example for them.
Mhm.
And but that's what started the trajectory. That it was
Mhm.
just thinking about what kind of example I want to be for my kids. And I have four daughters, so for me, it's like very protective of them, and I want to make sure that they kind of they don't have the same challenges. And of course, I'm sure they're going to have their own challenges, but I wanted them to be a little bit more educated when it comes to health because I feel like
Yeah.
growing up, my family, myself, I just didn't have that knowledge, that I do now. So and it's hard to.
And of Polynesian descent too. So there's a little culture factor in how you were brought up as well, right?
Right. Some of the traditional foods, aren't the healthiest as well. I mean, there's a lot of plant-based foods as well,
Sure.
but there's an emphasis in a lot of the meat products. So, go ahead.
And Po, when you say challenges, what are those challenges that you want to avoid for your daughters?
Honestly, is the relationship with food,
Mhm.
like understanding, like, you know, um, what types of food they're eating and how they can benefit you, and then also how they're a detriment to your health.
Yeah.
That's something that I didn't understand growing up. It wasn't until later in life that I really started to understand it. Because prior to that, with my culture, food is love. So when you go to relatives, families, it's like,
Yeah.
your aunt and uncles is like, oh, no, 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 you gotta
Eat.
stay and eat. You gotta have some of this.
Yeah.
It's like, I just ate. No, no, sit down. You gotta, let's talk. And that's the biggest thing. It's like, and even like, what do you associate with food is celebrations, or birthdays, first birthdays, luau's. I mean, everything is kind of food related, so it's really just kind of change, like either it's just changing the conversation about food and also starting a new one, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
starting a new conversation about what food is and what it can do for you, and and what food can also be, as far as like affecting you in your health too. So but yeah, it's a big topic,
Mhm.
and when I learned about plant-based eating, I mean, I think I'm like the first person in my family to ever take on this challenge, and I feel like I'm better with how I am with around meat products. But when I first learned about it, I was like, there's no way that I could do that, like it was such a foreign, like I just didn't think I could do it.
Mhm.
Um, but now it's a different conversation. Now it's like I do feel like I have that sort of willpower to be like, nah, I'm good. I mean,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of information out there, and then it's becoming a bigger movement, I think, as far as having access to information about
Yeah.
what meat can do as well. So
Eh, Thank you, Po. And Dr. Rock, before you jumped in, we were having a chance to chat with Po, and he was talking about how instrumental you have been in his journey. And I guess, I know we've had this conversation and we've touched on this conversation, but this is a great chance to go deep because the one thing Poe mentioned is that, he's been to Pivio, he's had an opportunity to spend some time in Abu Dhabi with the group there, trying to make these lifestyle changes stick. But how do you translate what we know from the 6 pillars into what it means to do this in everyday life? And how have you helped Poe make that transition from being in a closed environment to now living everyday life and making this work?
Yeah. Well, first, it's welcome back. I mean, it's wonderful to be back here, and I'm going to silence my notification. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Um, Poe and I always say this, and it's true. Poe and I met like we were meant to meet. Like the universe connected us, and anything that he or I gained from our relationship is like part of that meeting. Like, so I don't know. I act as a sounding board. I mean, in a way, I'm a lifestyle medicine. We've talked about that. And lifestyle medicine is really, and Poe and I talk about this, is the transition from being sort of the paternalistic physician who's telling you what to do to the coach who's there supporting you and really asking the right questions and helping you navigate and figure out how to implement this in your own life.
Mhm.
And so that is often what we do in our conversations. And it was a few months in and after a while I said, Poe, we started talking on Sundays a lot. And so I said, Poe, interestingly enough, it's a Sunday.
Yeah.
I said, Poe, let's because movement is something we talk a lot about, and
Yeah.
wanting to get it in a way that feels good, and And so I said, why don't we just start going on walks when we talk? And there was one day when we were walking and talking, and I don't, we were talking about challenges, struggles, opportunities, these types of things we talk about. And Poe said it. He said, he said, I think a lot of people would benefit from hearing these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked about how I help Poe, and in many respects, I think I'm just a vessel that the universe decided this was going to come to Poe in some way. And similarly, we've created something where more people, that avenue, that outlet. Poe always says there aren't a lot of places where people can just share their struggles and how their challenges and have a space where they can come together. And so community is something Poe and I talk a lot about too. And in that way, we've created Poe will talk more about this. He was in immersions and then he came back and he was like, how do I create community here? How do I have the right support here? And he was asking for it. And then the universe said, let me
Here's Rak.
with let me
Here's your rock.
Let me get the
He's
ball
your
rolling.
rock.
Here's your rock to lean on.
But yeah, just to go off of that, that's exactly what it was. Like one day I was like, man, these are great conversations. And I said, we should start something where we can just share it, and then one thing led to another. And I like how he put it. He definitely is like a coach. Because, when you think of a doctor, like, I don't know, some people might feel like, oh man, high blood pressure goes up. What is the doctor going to say? It's like, oh, they're going to tell me all this bad news. I got to do this. I got to do that, so, but when with Rock and I, man, it's just mostly like, how you doing today, Poe? What's going on? And it's just like, I come from, being an ex-athlete. So, coaches are encouragers, they're trying to find out where you need to improve on, or, add a little bit of this. And it's just, he always reframes, because we talk about exercise, right? Like, it's just reframing that word, movement. So instead of saying exercise, just get some movement. So it's not as like abrasive, like, oh, I got to go exercise, so, but that's, I think this relationship has been developing, and I'm learning a lot, as we go through. And that's the great part of it. It's just having somebody, an expert too. That's the other thing that's really cool. It's like, he's an expert in his field. So it's nice to be able to hey, what do you think about this? Man, I'm dealing with this. There's been plenty of times when I text him like, hey man, I'm going through it. This is going on in life. So it's just, and that's this type of space that I want to create, like almost like a team of people together that can, help encourage each other. Because that's that is the one thing that I found in the immersions, is that when you get a group of people together, there's a lot of power there. Like there's a lot of power that people can feed off of each other and get the momentum. Because when someone's down, and feeling challenged in that team, it's always nice to have somebody else there to kind of pull you up. Like, all right, it's all right. You ate this, it's okay. Let's just keep going. And it's just one challenge in the whole bigger picture of getting healthy. And that's the one thing that I can say for myself, is that it's like a lifelong. It's not like something from here to there, or I got to get in a shape for this wedding. Now this is like something that I got to do for the rest of my life. So
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I mean, that's essentially what health means to you, right? It's to live the best life. But have you encountered, what are some of the challenges that you had encountered, Poe, through your journey? And how had Dr. Oct helped you? Is it through those walks? And also, what type of changes did you make to get towards your health goals? Because I'm sure you're not alone. There's lots of listeners and viewers out there that are probably in the same situation. And so it's, you talked about your why and really living your best life for your family, for your children. But then, I'm sure there's been challenges throughout the journey, as everybody would have. And can you tell us a little bit about that and how you overcome and, pull back in? And
I think I'm finding that now as I continue through the journey, that where you spend the most time, like physically, has a lot to do with it. So like, for example, like if my current employer it's a pretty negative environment. And the one thing that me and Rock always talk about is like how that it always comes back to that for some reason. And so what Dr. Rock is been trying to help me figure out is how do I, number one, how do I reframe, going into that environment in my mind
Mhm.
versus
Mhm.
like, looking at it like as a way of like, okay, it's there. Can't control how it is in that environment, right? But how can I change who I am in that environment? And I'm still working through that trying to reframe it because how we're talking about our health, it's those types of situations they're not really talked about,
Mhm.
where I work,
Right.
so it's finding people around me there that are also on the health journey as well. That's one thing that I'm currently looking at. Like, okay, so
Mhm.
who's working on their health that I can sort of like become a counterpart to, or figure out, because right now it's like this is at home, so
Mhm.
and so that's one challenge. And then also like just like the practices, like sometimes I think meditation is one of like the biggest things that I've learned that was helpful for me. And Dr. Rock's always talking about, we always talk about that space before the decision, like
Mm.
there's that little time, for that time right in between you make that decision. That's the space that I need to grow,
Mhm.
because I notice when I'm not in that frame of mind, or if I'm completely thinking about something else, or like something happened at work that's causing a lot of stress, if I don't work on improving that space before I make the decision, I'm more inclined to just make the decision, make the choice
Mhm.
that's not going to affect
Mm.
me versus like sitting with it for a little bit and kind of like let the whatever the stress that's caused kind of pass, and then see where I'm at again later. Um, but I think the other thing that is just consistency, because we've been doing these, we've been doing our talks like every Mondays in the morning, and it's like just having that consistency is nice too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just being able to do like, okay, at this time, at this day, it's little steps. Like being back home, it's been really difficult, to be quite honest. It's been really challenging because the whole house is not on plant-based eating, not even my
Mhm.
wife. So it's been a challenge, but I feel like if I just continue to just keep moving forward, like just keep pushing and keep like having the conversations, that it'll. Because I swear that the way it was when I was in these immersions, I mean, literally, I would come back and the momentum was just so big that.
Mm.
But what happens is if it's not consistent,
Yeah.
like it's like slowly
Yeah.
going back into the old habits. So
Mhm.
that's the biggest challenge, is just finding the spaces where people are really trying to, like the community, right? That we talk about. That's why community is one of the biggest things we talk about. It's like I'm finding that that's the biggest challenge, is like just not having that community. And online is the best place. Like for me, I found
Mm.
most of it is online. I think if I were to try to figure out, and I've been searching locally as well, just there's different support groups that I've told Rock that I've been trying to get back into, be a part of. That's been something that I've been looking at. But I don't know if that answers your question, but those are, I mean,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
trying to find
Yeah.
more challenges, but I think those are the biggest ones right now.
I'm going to ask a flip question before we go to Dr. Rock, but that's like, what are some of the favorites of yours? So we talk about the challenges, but what are some of the benefits that you felt that keep you going?
Exactly.
That's a good one. I think, like for me, meditation is big. When I do practice and I make the time for it, I feel a lot more relaxed when it comes to like making a decision.
Mhm.
It's so fast that like you can be out of it if you're not practicing consistently. Yeah,
Mhm.
I feel like when I was practicing consistently, I was more, life is happening, not happening to me.
Right.
Mhm.
Because sometimes, or I should say, when I'm not practicing meditation, I feel like life is happening to me.
To you. Yeah.
Right, right. And then when I am practicing and I am in that space, the meditative state, I feel like I view it as it's not attached to me. It's just something that's happening,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? And so I usually will eat, right? The habits of eating, those habits come when I'm not practicing.
Mhm.
Mm.
That's what I've experienced of it, is that when life is happening to me, then I feel like food becomes my natural decision as a way
Mhm.
to cope with it. Whereas if I'm in meditative state and I'm practicing, I feel like I don't it's not attached to me. It's just something that happens.
Mhm.
So
Right.
that's probably one of the powers, one of the greater things. Um, and then just getting like more information. We talk. Dr. Rock's always, he's always um, up to date with all the studies and stuff that. So we go back and forth, and he's like, he'll always say, tell me some new study that just came out. I'm like, wow, and I feel like that's probably one of the benefits too, is that I'm always able to like kind of reach out to him when I need some type of support over something, and he's always great to like respond, and you know what I mean, like just developing that. And then his ideas, like there's times like he always says, so who cooks in the house? And I mean, when I'm not busy, I'll cook, but he was always giving me some of his recipes, some of the stuff that he makes to help me out. And so like, and then when I'm working out, it's just nice having someone that you feel like you're accountable to. See, that's the other thing that's really nice. It's like, yeah, it's like I can shoot him a text like, hey, I'm doing the Peloton today. And he gives me the thumbs up, like, so I don't know. That's just a few things that I can think off the top of my head. I'm sure throughout this podcast, I'll think of more. So
awesome.
And Dr. Rock, so what Po has described, and completely agree that you are more of a coach than a physician, but two things that come up, and I'd love your thoughts, because Po's not only talking about adopting a plant-based lifestyle, but how does he change his relationship with food? How does he become present in his life and not let life happen to him, but allow himself to be in a state of mind where he can actually make those conscious choices and not respond to the situation? How are you, how do you do that coaching? And it's not something that you can do in a 15-minute physician's visit, which I think is fundamentally why we need to change what healthcare, how we engage with our patients, and how we support, community members like Po, because just saying go change your diet isn't the solution. It's everything that's wrapped around that.
That's right. So how am I doing it with Po, or how do I do it in general?
Both.
Okay.
Because I think you have a unique, and I love how you check in with Po on the Health Feast. I mean, that in itself is just amazing. Always starting with that check-in, but how are you navigating that with Po? And then what advice do you have for those listening or watching for them finding a way to do what you have done with Po?
So first I'll point out, I mean, you said it, right? Traditional physician visits are short. They're 15 minutes. And your traditional physician isn't really trained in coaching or lifestyle modification or the therapeutic use of lifestyle change to help treat your disease. So typically physicians might say, this is what you should do. You should eat healthier. They may even say you should eat more fruits and vegetables, and certainly, and move, and exercise more. That often is what. And I was just reflecting on this with someone the other day. I was saying, I think we're in a state now where the system is so overwhelmed because there's so many people who have so many needs. Chronic condition management has become the majority of care that we provide is managing chronic conditions. And physicians now, I think a lot of them believe that it's not even worth me saying it anymore because their patients aren't going to do this. That's the experience that people have over years. Is you look at every guideline for every chronic condition, the first thing it'll say is make lifestyle changes as grade A evidence, like the top of the line. That's the first thing you should do. But then in practice, if you look at how people are supported to make lifestyle changes, they're not certainly talking about it extensively with their doctor, but they're also not regularly being referred to somebody who could support them in the right way. So a health coach could, or a dietitian could potentially, if they've been trained to sort of work with patients in more coaching. And so that's the first piece, is that people need the right kind of support. You can't just say, just like you said, you can't just say like, these are the changes you should make. To Po's point, like ideally you start with their why. So there's like a sort of deeper delve into who this person is, why it's important for them to make change. And one thing that requires time and comes up a lot is kind of people's history with making change, people's history with trauma, people's history with adverse childhood events, right? We know that the more adverse childhood events you have as a child, if you were physically, emotionally abused, or there's a huge list of adverse childhood events, that you're have a harder time making changes, making behavior changes, lifestyle changes as an adult. And so inherent in that is we need to address those traumas or those adverse childhood events, but we don't have a system that's set up around supporting people in that way. We have a system that's set up around mitigating illness or managing illness in as efficient as possible way, and not kind of, and this is part and parcel, I think, with our mental health crisis. Poe and I talk about this too, because, right, they're not actually different things. Like mental and I mean, we have in modern medicine, we have made it mental health is a very separate thing, but actually it's a foundation of our health, just like anything else is. It's arguably more foundational. And so the lack of support that I think a lot of people get with their mental health care is also kind of indicative or reflective of the lack of support that people might get for lifestyle care. Many times when I was seeing patients in primary care clinic, and they would say, no doctor has talked to me about this. No one has told me this is an option, and that would actually make me sad, to know that our system as a default doesn't do this, doesn't follow what every guideline says, which is to, make lifestyle changes. And guideline may say that, but in practice, what you're asking is how do people actually do that? And so they need support if it's from their healthcare team. But I've said this to Poe too. You don't have to wait for the healthcare system to evolve for you to start taking control of your health.
Sure.
In fact, our healthcare system is a misnomer because, right, it's an illness care, sick care system.
Correct.
And so if you really want to take control of your health, I mean, Poe was in the PIVIO. PIVIO was originally the CHIP program, and that was founded on community volunteers being before there were fancy videos that Poe's in now. It was local classes that were taught by community members, not by doctors, not by nurses, but by community members. That is to say that these tools that people need to make changes that are sustainable, to make it possible in their life to eat this way, to learn how to cook this way, to learn how to think about making these changes this way, that can be, there's something powerful when it comes from their doctor. Absolutely. And I think there's a huge role for kind of the medical community in leading this work. Daphne and I work with an incredible professional organization that gets that. But beyond that, it's not just doctors, right? It's a whole ecosystem of people who are, and even people who don't have, that's what I was saying, even people who don't have formal health training or fitness training background, just people who are good people. And they're doing this at University of Pennsylvania now. They're studying this with cancer patients and even non-cancer patients, like where they just train community members to be like a medical aid at home, but they're also training them like how to do like health coaching at the same time. So it's meeting this need that, patients like an senior citizen or elderly patient in the community may need kind of home support. And then while at the same time, there's someone coming into their home and seeing like, oh, these are the foods you're eating, and like I can work with you to improve that.
Exactly.
So
that's what people need. People don't need like a program and then they follow it for 30 days or 10 days or whatever, and then it's done, and it's maybe, their own, the food that they may be selling. It's okay, here, this is my lifestyle. I have 3 boys. I work full time. I do this. How am I going to integrate this way and lifestyle into my life, because right now I can't see anybody else around me that does it. And so how does that work? So that is what we need. We do need people to come in to say, this is how you should integrate it. And maybe it's in multiple phases. Maybe it's not just all, let's rip the Band-Aid off and you're going to go 100% plant-based. It's integration, slowly integrating it all, just to make sure it's sustainable.
Although there is Po has experienced this. I experienced this. Like, would it say going Olympic, when you don't say like, I'm going to go 100% plant-based forever, but you say, I'm going to do it for 3 weeks. Now, Po did it because, right, you went to immersions where they were like, guess what?
Yeah, they ripped off that Band-Aid.
Rip that Band-Aid off.
I love Po shows up at these immersions. Well, the second one, I think, you didn't know before going, but you got there and you're like, okay, I've been through this. I've been doing this.
Yeah.
But the first one, what was your reaction when they were like, yeah, you're not going to eat animal products anymore?
Dude, I was like, what? They give me my flight back home, man. I don't know what's going on. I'm going home.
Because we've been living in this lifestyle that's okay. You want your journey or your goal is weight loss, let's just say, then you're going to eat the lean meats and vegetables, right? Like cut out the carb.
Yes.
And that's
a big part of it. I feel like marketing is such a big deal, and that's the other thing that we learned. It's just like, man, the food companies, man. When you turn on the television, and most people watch TV still, right?
Yeah.
What do you have? It's just bombarded by like all the different, fast food companies. So it's like there's big money behind that, and when you understand that, the food companies have shareholders and that they have to make money, there's no like if, ands, or buts, and it's like all along Popeyes was telling us this whole time. Popeye was telling us this whole time to eat spinach, right? To eat spinach.
Make you strong.
Not the restaurant.
Yeah,
not
the restaurant. Popeye the Sailor Man.
Popeye the Sailor Man been telling us to eat spinach this whole time since like the 50s, and nobody was listening. I mean, now we're going back to it, but like it's just crazy to me that that's the hard part, is like these conversations are so important because the machine is completely the opposite of it, so these are the types of conversations me and Rock be having about it, though.
It is. I mean, I think it's very tough. Go ahead, Daphne.
No, I was just going to say, I think Dr. Deb brought up a good point, which is so the community piece is one that is completely underestimated, and the ability to actually understand what the day-to-day life is for an individual. Rock, we saw some of the early opportunity with using community-based programming, the diabetes prevention program. That's how that got started. Those were just lay people in the community who were trained to have these conversations, but going into the home, actually looking and seeing what's in the pantry, understanding how to, Po, I'm sure you have family meals that are traditional meals that you love and you don't want to give up, but how do you translate that into something that is adding more plant forward approach to it, so that we can meet you where you are, but also bring your family along with you, because they may not be ready to go Olympic, and we can't underestimate the power of that community in terms of ongoing consistency and stickiness, because otherwise you go to an immersion, you come back and you slowly revert to life as it was pre-immersion.
That's right. That is right. Po and I talk about community all the time, and it's your local community, like in your family, and community and environment, like food environment, because that has a direct impact. Like other people are bringing food in the house.
Yeah.
Well, and Po has 4 daughters. I have 3 boys. Dr. Rock, you have one of each.
A daughter and 2 boys.
Yeah. And it's it's one of those things where those kids they want some Doritos. They want some cookies, and so I mean they have their own set of foods that they just want, and I mean it's fine. Like I'm not I don't
Yeah.
I don't tell my kids they can't have some of the foods that I personally choose not to have, but it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult, especially during times of when you're not in your right mindset, and you're just hungry and you're just going to grab something, and even though it's maybe a cassava chip, it's still a chip.
Yes.
It's
Those
still a chip.
that's my problem, is like all these quote unquote healthy chips are all just chips.
They're
fried
Yeah.
vegetable.
they're
All right, let's get
so-
back on track. So during our last discussion, Dr. Rock, you switched jobs and joined a company named Mora. So how has your perspective on lifestyle medicine changed since joining Mora? I mean, I think you've always been an advocate in that area. But what has really been a recent change through your new path?
Yeah. I for ever since I learned about this, I learned about lifestyle medicine like as a formal, and I don't know how I didn't know about it, but 2017, and the minute I learned about it, I was like, oh, and there's certification. I figure out how to get certification. And because in my head, I was like, it resonated so deeply with me. I was like, this is how I want to practice.
Yeah.
This is what and I didn't understand it at the time. I'm saying it now, but this is why I went into medicine, right? To serve, to help people get better. And I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that in the hospital, and I'm seeing the end result of the system. And so that really kind of drove me. But in my head, I was thinking, like, this doesn't exist. Like, people don't do lifestyle medicine. I mean, they do it. People are doing it in their clinics and their crevices, and that's how I was kind of doing it. And now it's almost like too good to be true. I say I practice lifestyle medicine. I'm a lifestyle medicine physician. My full-time job is having individual visits and also group visits. So we do group visits where we see 8, 9, 10 patients at a time. So actually shared medical appointments.
Yep.
They're having an appointment together over an hour, because in that hour, I could see 4 patients in 15-minute visits. But in that hour, and not just 1 week, right? These patients will come have 10 group visits over the course of 2.5 months, 3 months. How much content I can deliver and how much they learn, not just from me, from other people's experiences, and then to go back to it, that sense of community that gets created even in a virtual environment. I've been so happy and impressed how we can create that kind of space. I'm not formally trained in facilitation. It's been so interesting, but there are a lot of things about being a good facilitator that really come back to being a good listener. I think it's very similar to being a good coach, is just being a good listener, because we're doing sort of group coaching amongst a lot of people. So I kind of hear what people are saying, and then there's this type of interviewing in healthcare or in medicine or in addiction counseling and lifestyle medicine. It's called motivational interviewing, and you're asking questions, getting the information, and then you're sort of presenting it, reflecting it back in a provocative way, such that it gets them to sort of understand what their internal motivation might be. So when they say, like, Po, when you say, like, I'm doing this for my kids, it's really important for my kids, I'll tuck that away, and then later might ask, when he tells me how something's going, I might ask, like, how do you think that's impacting the example you're setting for your kids? Just to remind him that's because then he starts thinking, he's like, well, those two things, they're not in alignment. And when he makes that realization and says it out loud, so doing that in a group is a little bit more challenging, but actually not that different. And it's really cool when people have those realizations as in a group and they share, because everybody sort of then sees
it's
that
community.
It is.
Yeah. It's that community
it
that
creates a sense of community. It creates a space for people to be vulnerable, to share their because really, I mean, and Poe and I went on a group together. So one of my former colleagues is running a Pivio group for patients. And how many? There were like 20 some patients, Poe. And they really wanted Poe to come on. They invited us, but they wanted Poe to come on. And he was supposed to come on for 10 minutes. And it was an hour group. They just kept, because Poe's like a celebrity with them because they've been seeing the Pivio videos. And you're like front and center. And they're like, whoa, Poe is here. And Poe, you want to share like how remarkable that hour was? This was just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think what a lot of it is like I think when it comes to that type of space where you have people in groups, I think people when they share like authentically what's going on in their journey, I think people connect with that. You know, the realness of a journey is what people connect with. And I feel like for me, they were just talking about how they appreciate me being so real. And I was like, I for me, it's just like, I'm just want to share like the difficulty of it is because if I don't put it out there and I don't, then I might not get the response. I might not get the help, like if someone else is dealing with the same thing, if I talk surface, kind of superficial about how the journey is, then I'm really not getting the help that I'm seeking, and if I share like, that it's been challenging, it's not always, rainbows and unicorns, you know what I mean? Like it can be grimy, it can be difficult. So in that session with the Pivio group, I think I kind of I put it out there like what I'm dealing with and some of my wins and some of my losses, and it resonated with people. And I think that's the reason why I feel like that was the response, was just because I do my best to kind of like look internally first, like figure out what's going on within me, that's what's the challenges. And me and Rock talk about it all the time, man. He's like been a great resource of like help to sort of dive into some of those challenges that I have. So but I think that's what it is. It's just, I think, and that's why the response was so great. It's because several times people would come on and like in the meeting would say, "Hey, Poe, I appreciate you being real," and I said that, and to me, it's like it's not really a thing. It's not really challenging for me to like speak from like from the heart. I guess my mom always told me to speak from the heart. You'll never regret what you say. So that's something that I still live now. So.
Yeah.
But I think that's why the community is important, is for those moments of people that are really, because it wasn't until I shared how hard it was, and some of the people I think that didn't speak up much were starting to talk in the group.
Sure.
I was told this after the group. I said, by my former colleague, she said, normally the group, like people share a lot of positive things. And I was like, that's Poe, like by coming on, by just being very honest about what's been hard for you, suddenly like it allowed people to say, I can share what's hard for me. Wow. And there was some really intense sharing, and in a good way. I mean, I think that's where change happens, when people recognize. There was a woman who was she broke down in tears because she's going every week. She's trying so hard. She wants to eat this way. And then every weekend they're going to family gatherings where they have all these spreads. And she's like, I just don't know what to do anymore. I go all week. And then on the weekend we're at this family's
goes off the cliff
together, and this family's get together. Yeah. And that's real. That's not that's happening. Yeah.
So, Poe, usually as we wrap up on Perfectly Planted, we ask about your day in the life. And I want to flip it a little bit, because those who are listening or viewing won't have the benefit of having seen you as part of the Pivio program. Can you share just 3 things? I mean, being real, and we're real in this context because I agree with Rock. If you're having community conversations and everyone is, oh, this is so easy and so wonderful. Yeah. You need to open a safe space for people to say, I'm struggling, I need help. And hearing you share some of that would be a huge value to people. If you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes.
Yeah. So the question was, What?
What are 3 struggles? What are,
Oh,
I don't want to say
okay.
struggles,
Challenges, maybe some challenges that I have.
challenges or opportunities that
Opportunities.
you would love to share with people?
Um, Honestly, for me, the biggest thing is just how to frame, where you spend the most time, and if those spaces are helping you get where you want, or if those spaces are not helping you at all. And I've been me and Brock talk a lot about how to, if you can't reframe it, then maybe I should start thinking about removing myself from those
Mm.
spaces. So it could be a job, it could be, man, it could even be a home environment. I don't know, whatever the situation may be. I think that's one of my biggest things. That's something that I'm up against right now, presently. Is just, it's. I don't want to come across like I'm ungrateful because my employer pays me to be able to sustain the lifestyle that supports my family. And it's like I'm stuck because I value my health too.
Mm.
So, the dilemma is, okay, what's more important, and you always hear that, health or wealth is your health. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
and we were me and Brock were talking about it last week. It's like as someone who's sick, their only wish is to just be healthy, and they
Yeah.
can be a millionaire. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So that's the biggest thing that I'm up against right now. It's like I found that in my life so far that when I'm in environments that cultivate wellness and mental health and physical health, and that those are the environments that I thrive in, right? And I feel like I get the best results when I'm in an environment where cultivating health is a big deal.
Mm.
But then, you only have so much time in your day. So it's like if I find that most of my days in an environment that's not really about that, then I think I need to start thinking about doing something else. So
Mm.
that's the biggest challenge that I've been dealing with right now. And the second one would be sort of getting my wife to buy into plant-based eating.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing because I find that it's because I'm in the household where I'm the only one that's really cares about, okay, what we're putting in our mouth. Like my wife, she would get on it and like she would learn about it. We watched all the documentaries,
Mm.
we'll go for a little bit, and then it's like, it's just not same thing. Like she didn't go to the immersion. That's the other thing that would be helpful if she was had the opportunity to do an immersion or go to an experience where you're learning how to, because it's still hard to not experience if you haven't experienced um, the result of going completely plant-based for 3 weeks, then you would never know what
Mhm.
it's just like this far off thing. So getting your household on board, and then honestly, my last thing would just be like always revisit like why it is. Like I say it's my kids because it is definitely that was the first decision was for my kids, but essentially it's always getting back to that self talk.
Mm.
Like what am I saying to myself every single day?
Mhm.
And it can be different.
Mhm.
It just depends on how what happens in your crazy life. Like
Mhm.
I think if I can maintain the same conversation every day or that same inner why, like why, okay, yeah, you're doing it for your kids, but what else is it about?
Mhm.
Because sometimes what I found in my journey is that it goes deeper than just,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
and it's always being honest with myself
Yep.
every single day is just being honest with and just and go from there and build off of that. So I think those are like the three things that I'm currently dealing with and also still trying to work through.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thanks, Poe.
That's great. Yeah. So on each of our Perfectly Planted podcasts, we talk about, mindset, gratefulness. We always know that if you set time to point out what you're grateful for, it kind of pushes away some of the negative thoughts that we have. You mentioned that poem. This question is for both of you. So Dr. Rock, why don't you go first? What are you grateful for today?
Oh my
You
goodness.
get, not waking your son up and being miserable.
No, as I sit here, I almost like beam when I listen to Poe. I don't know how or why we were exactly why we were connected. I always say we say it's unfolding in front of us, and sometimes you don't know your own gifts, because I say that about myself maybe, and I say that about Poe because sometimes Poe, he wonders, he's like, who am I? And then we go to a group like that Pivio group, and you have people crying and sharing their experience, and I'm sort of sitting there watching, and I'm like, wow, this is a gift. This is magic. It's not magic. It's empathy, and it's Poe, how you, so who I'm grateful for him coming into my life. It's it's been my own journey, mission, I had all these positive changes in my life from lifestyle changes. I wanted to help other people, patients. I wanted to create something beyond that we start to share this information and how help people to do this. And I didn't know how that was going to happen. I asked myself in quiet moments, like, what is this going to look like? And I'm like most people, Poe and I talk about this, like when you do something alone, and you two know this because you two, I was saying to Poe, I was like, they have like a team, like us,
yeah.
Dr. Daphne and Besame, and I said, Poe, like this pull, he pulls me forward in so many ways. He pulls me forward. And Friday and yesterday, I was editing our most recent episode, and I get this joy out of it. And we got to this point where we have this creative process, and we're doing this regularly. I couldn't get there. I tried and sort of failed multiple times over the last few years, where I had like podcast ideas and wrote up stuff. I even did a few years ago, I did a couple interviews, which are sitting somewhere on something that I should dig up. And then this man, Poe, you entered my life, and I found a reason uh, for doing all that work to create something. Just it came from finding you. So that's what I'm grateful for.
Like Super Soul
Thank
Sunday
you,
right
Rock.
now. I love
Yeah,
that.
man.
I love
Thank
that.
you, Rock. I
That's like
appreciate
tugs
that.
at your heart. And you know what? As much as Dr. Rock has helped you, Poe, I think you've absolutely helped
I
Dr. Rock, as
agree.
you said. So it's such a beautiful thing. So Poe, it's your turn. What are you most grateful for today?
Honestly, Rock, you know how I feel about you, brother. I appreciate you
Yeah.
too. And I am grateful that we, that our lives crossed, man. You always wonder about, when you come across certain people, you're like, man, I'm appreciative of that. I think, to be honest, I think for me, I'm just grateful just for just to have like breath, right? Because as long as you're alive, I feel like you have a choice.
Yes.
Um, and sometimes you don't know what that breath is gonna take, or what it's gonna happen, or how many breaths it's gonna take to do something else. And I feel like just being grateful to be present, because I had a conversation with a friend yesterday, and he was like going through it. He's challenged right now. He's thinking about making some big moves in his life, and he was like, "Man, but just think about it, man. It's like first world problems that we're having here. Like there's other
Yeah.
places in the world that are just like
Mhm.
people that are getting, bombed on, or you know what I mean. So it's just sometimes I forget, like even though I'm still in this journey of health, but it's quite small. Not to like make it feel like a small thing, but it's always good to remember that there's
Yeah.
somewhere, someplace that somebody's really suffering in whatever way, and that we get to wake up in a nice, comfortable house and get on this podcast. So
Yeah.
that's the perspective that I kind of, after you asked that question, I was like, man, I'm just grateful to be able to be here and spend time with everybody here on the podcast to just share like my just small challenges that I have in my life compared to the grand scheme of things. So I think that's what I'm grateful for today.
Poe, thank you. Thank you both. I mean, and don't minimize your ability to impact the life of another person.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the four of us all, we never really understood why we came together, but I really do think that, and Poe, this is your community. This is your family. We are always here to help you on your journey. And the fact that you have the ability to touch other people, even if it's one life that you touch by your words or your actions or someone who listens to you and Dr. Rock on the Health Feast, that's a huge why. And so we are going to be excited to continue to follow your journey and know that we are here anytime to support you in addition to Dr. Rock. There are wings beneath you that are spreading to help you achieve the health goals that you want, because we want you to be here for the next 50 years or 60 years and to live a life as full of health as possible. And our goal with Sunday Seedlings is to plant these type of seedlings in the life of those who join us on the podcast and those who are listening and viewing. So I want to thank you both for joining us today. And I know that we will have you back because I think we've just barely scraped the surface of a lot of these topics. I mean, I'd love to dig deeper into not just the nutrition, but the movement and the stress reduction and the social connection and the avoiding risky substances. I mean, every one of the pillars of lifestyle medicine, we could probably talk about for an hour.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But before we come back on, we will be having the two of you.
Yeah, yes.
Health Feast, that's
sure.
right.
Health Feast. Yeah. Hey, we're game. We are game.
And we will bring a green smoothie when we're on.
Yeah, we'll bring our green drink.
Nice.
There we go. That'd be a great idea. Yeah, I'll make a green smoothie too.
I'll make a green smoothie too. Okay.
We'll get it all in our teeth. It'll be great.
Well, thank you. I want to thank everyone who's listening and viewing. And I want to thank you both more specifically for getting up with us early on a Sunday. And I can't tell those listening enough. Please, if you haven't subscribed to the Health Feast, please do so. The conversations are so positive and uplifting and filled with little pearls of wisdom when you listen to Dr. Rak and Po and the guests that they bring on their podcast. And we are so fortunate to have this opportunity to meet with you today. And we look forward to seeing you again on the podcast in the very near future.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful.